And I think it was important for us to kind of level set with the immediate thoughts because now what I'd like to do is I like to kind of pivot a little bit and kind of follow some of the key themes that came up. You know, in preparation for this, I decided to just sit in a room with some 16-year-olds, and I actually showed them what you guys just watched, and they gave me some real feedback, and they really tapped into culture. You know, young people,
Yeah.
you know, they're absorbing culture at a rate so fast right now. And one of the young people asked this question, and I was like, you know, actually tongue-tied, didn't know how to answer it. He said, do we really have influence? He said, you know, if black people really have influence in mainstream America, then what are the ways that we can leverage that influence to have a better life? And I said, well, talk to me more about that. And the more and more he talked to me about it, the one thing that I came away with is that how do we translate that influence, if we have it, to a more equitable experience in America? And so how do we do that? And so that's one of the questions that they came with. And so if there's an appreciation for the way that we walk and talk in the swag or the way that we influence things, for an example, where does that end up? I'm going to start on the other end with Terrence. Politically, socially, and economically, how do we shift that paradigm?
Well, I think influential-wise, we have economic buying power. You know, so we're influenced by our dollars that we spend or don't spend. As I walk around Detroit, oftentimes when I'm going into a gas station, which is fundamental to having a car, you go into a gas station. Why is there a bulletproof glass there? That, to me, represents environmental racism. You're telling me that I want your dollar, but yet, if something happens, I'm going to be covered and you're not. There's drug paraphernalia being sold and counterfeit clothing, and no one says anything. So when I talk about power, we have power with our buying. We can shut anybody down. Target, Macy's, you name it. We can shut them down. Just don't go there. If you don't value us, if my life doesn't have value, my dollar doesn't have value, and doesn't circulate in our community, we have to stop this economic violence and ethnic suicide in our community. We can shut them down.
So Kim, the flip side to shutting people down, when you think about the political landscape and economic and social landscape, what's the flip side of that in terms of a more equitable experience?
Well, I think, when we talk about influence, I think the piece spoke to this to a certain extent. I want to kind of go back to what Dr. Peter said about culture, because I think Black culture is so powerful in our country right now. It always has been, but it's been. We have this platform, and I just don't think we always use it the way that we should. So I'm a child of hip hop. I grew up with the hip hop era. Hip hop is such a powerful force for positive change. It could be, but it's often not. And because of this intersectionality that I feel as a Black woman, I'm sometimes loath to really critique hip hop because I want to have my brother's bags. But at the same time, I need them to have ours too. So I think that we need to be more sophisticated in the way that we leverage our cultural power so that the Curtis Mayfields and the Nina Simones and the Kendrick Lamars and the positive people who are trying to use their voices to challenge, because some people really are awakened. And I don't think, obviously that's not the total solution. None of us know how you change the hearts of men. But I think that if we are more responsible with the way that we leverage our culture, it could really have a very positive impact.
So I'm going to circle back. Thank you for that. I'm going to circle back to the Honorable Adam Shakur. From a historical perspective, when you think about your years in office and your years as a judge, and you've seen a lot, and when you think about culture and the real influence of the Black community, where does the real influence lie, and how do we leverage that based on your years of experience?
The influence that we have lies within us having an understanding of who we are and whose we are. And when I look back in history as to Black folk who had been enslaved, and in that first generation after enslavement, they were able to produce a great deal of wealth by way of their agricultural ownership, their collective working together, and built some very stable fortunes. in terms of the whole effort to establish colleges and universities, Booker T. Washington, all of the colleges, the A&Ms, A&Is, et cetera, agriculture, industrial, agricultural and mechanical, those schools still survive and have trained most of the leadership that those of us who lived or were educated in the South benefited from. So at this particular point in time, we need to really look at examples of where people pool their resources. If one person came here to, say, Detroit, because Ford was hiring out of a small town, say in Alabama, got a job, he would call back home and tell his cousins, his friends, and everyone else they're hiring at Ford's. And they would come up here, and that's how that migration took place northward. There was just the opportunity, not just the opportunity of jobs, but there was a communal or collective attitude. I think that if we begin to look at that aspect of how we survived, how we grew, and how we prospered, Detroit had, at the time of the riot, they predicted Detroit would never have a riot or rebellion, more properly. But they predicted it because there were jobs plentiful. I came out of high school, and 2 days later, I was hired at Ford Rouge. There was an opportunity for people to be employed. There was no other city in America that had more single-family homes owned by black people than were owned here in Detroit.
And that's what you call equity. So
Yes.
I appreciate you jumping in.
So
on that.
economically, it was advantageous. It's just a mindset in which we deal with those economics that we do have.